And with me today, I have Lisa Tickle, who is an insightful host of the Healing and Growing Hand in Hand podcast, of which I was also a guest on. And the
Yes,
podcast,
you are.
yeah, and is dedicated to empowering childhood trauma survivors through personal stories, expert insights, and practical tools for healing. With a mission to shorten the pain of survivors, Lisa brings a compassionate approach rooted in her own experiences and expertise. Through her podcast, she raises awareness about the long term effects of trauma while fostering a supportive community of healing and growth. Lisa's work emphasizes resilience, self care, and personal empowerment, making her a transformative voice in trauma recovery. Welcome to the show, Lisa.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Oh, amazing. Yeah. Excited to hear more about you, seeing that the tables were turned the last time we spoke and it was all about me.
Yes. Yes, I learned about you, so now it's time for you to learn about me.
Exactly, yeah. So it'd be great for you to share a bit about your own journey, Lisa, with trauma and healing.
It's
Mm.
been a long journey. It's been a really long journey. My trauma started, my childhood abuse started way back, like that little picture of me back there. There we go. Yeah, that little picture back there, that's me. And that's about probably the time that it started. So it was pretty much my foundation. And it was all abuse except for sexual. And it came from my brother and my parents. And so my brother, um, he ended up at a very young age, ended up having a drug problem, which only caused the problem to get worse, actually, coming home drunk or stoned or whatever. And so he would act out and he would lash out. And the problem with my parents is they didn't protect me. And then as time went on, my mom actually used the abuse to help kind of manage and control me. And so that was tough. And then when I was 14, my mom was diagnosed with breast cancer, and at 16, I lost her. And so that was a whole traumatic thing right there, losing my mom. And the hardest part of it is I didn't even know she was that sick. I didn't realize she was dying. I was very instrumental in her care. I helped with it, but they kept it from me because they didn't want me to know, which was, you could imagine how traumatic that is when you're finding out, 3 days before she passes. Um, and so, and during that time, I did realize that I had had abuse in my life, and I realized enough that I also was aware that it can be passed down. And I don't know why I was aware of that, but I was. And so I even considered not even having a family because I was so worried about that. And I thought, you know what, let's go on a healing journey. Let's figure this out, because I knew there was something in me that, wasn't right. I never called myself broken, but I knew something wasn't right. And so I started my healing journey at 19. I'm now 61, so it's been a long, long journey. For the most part, there wasn't anything out there helping. That we didn't know about trauma like we know today. There wasn't the modalities out there that there is today. And so I did a lot of it on my own. I did go to therapy, but there wasn't really trauma therapy per se. It was more talk therapy.
Yeah.
And so I struggled along the way, and I was in survival mode for many years. And it was probably the last 15 years is when I've done the most of my healing, or, it's really, what's the word? It's excelled. And a lot of that is because we do have more understanding of trauma. I have had specialized therapy for trauma. I've researched it myself. I know knowledge is a really big thing when it comes to your trauma, is understanding it, because I read that in a lot of the trauma research that I was doing, and it kept kind of popping up of, having an understanding of trauma and how it'll help you on your healing journey. I know that's so true for me.
Mm.
And so here I am. My goal with the podcast really is to shorten people's pain so they don't have to go through 20, 30, 40, 50 years of suffering before they actually, begin to heal. And they don't need to.
I don't need to. Yeah, you're right. Oh, wow. I think that's phenomenal. So you mentioned that you did a lot of the work yourself. So what exactly did you do?
Well, in my younger years, up until about probably 15 years ago, I was involved in church. I did go to church. And so there was a few kind of classes that I took, like one on boundaries. I had never understood about boundaries, didn't have a clue, not a clue. And boy, that was eye-opening for me. But I think one of the biggest for me was in the early 2000s. I did take a women's childhood abuse healing workshop through my church. And it was really profound, actually. I didn't think I needed it because I thought I was just fine. What
Mhm.
I didn't realize at that time, and this is really common too with trauma, with people dealing with trauma, is I had worked through the forgiveness of my brother and kind of worked through that. I didn't even have a clue that my parents were actually part of the abuse. So it was in there, yeah, which is crazy. I was so focused on my brother that I didn't even pay attention until then.
I get
And
that.
then I started kind of looking, I'm like, okay, wow, okay, there's more to this.
Wow.
So I did the workshop, and that's what kind of like got me motivated, I guess is the right word. And then about 5 years or so after I took the workshop, the woman that created that workshop reached out to me and a friend of mine and asked if we wanted to actually take over the workshop and do it ourselves.
Mm,
And we did, and we did it for 8 years. And
wow.
it was amazing. And you think, oh, I'm helping all these people, which is true. I did. We helped hundreds of women. But when you're going through those workshops and you're leading them or you're co-facilitating them, you're going through a lot of healing and a lot of growth yourself. And it
Yeah.
would start up probably a few weeks before we would start the workshop. And there would be something that I would have to deal with within myself.
Wow.
And so that's kind of what helped me along. Um, and then again, like probably around 2011, 2012, when I went through my divorce, is when I really started to do deep dives. And again, there was things out there for me to be able to access now, which wasn't there before.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's so much in the last decade, so many modalities have come up.
Yes.
Yeah, I just find them fascinating. There's always new ones
Mhm.
coming up. And I know, I mean, you don't have to obviously talk more about this if you don't want to, but I'm just thinking, a question which like my listeners might have right now is, what kind of abuse it was from the
Right.
parents, from the brother, because like you said, you didn't even realize that it was abuse. And so, I just feel maybe this is a similar situation for many people out there.
Yes. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
I don't mind sharing it all. I'm completely transparent about it. So with my brother, a lot of it, it was interesting because there was two different styles of abuse, if you want to call that. So there was abuse that happened when I was little. And then there was abuse that happened from when I started to hit my teenage years.
Mm.
And so in my younger years, a lot of it was my brother. My brother was 7 years older than me. And like I said, probably around 12 or 13, he started getting involved in drugs. And so you could imagine it was real unstable for me at a very young age. And it was verbal, emotional, and definitely physical abuse. He would hit me, he would hold me down. He was always scaring me. He was always sneaking up and scaring me. And so there was a lot of that, and it was pretty bad.
Mm.
Um, Around the time that I was probably around 12, I started emotionally eating. Well, of course I did. At the
Yeah.
time, I had no idea what that was. And so I did. And so I started putting weight on. And then, of course, at 12 or 13 years old, girls, their bodies start going through a lot of changes. And so, you tend to kind of get a little chubby anyway. Well, I got quite chubby. And my mom, who loved to dress me up, pretty little blonde girl, she loved dressing me up. She loved showing me off. All of a sudden, I'm not cute anymore. All of a sudden, I've got weight on me. And that's when the abuse with her really started. And she got really vicious. It was things like she didn't believe me when I was sick. She even got to the point when I put weight on, she said, I'm not buying you any more clothes until you lose weight. And here I am. I didn't even understand why I was putting on weight, let alone would I know how to take the weight off. I didn't understand what was going on.
Yeah.
And she stuck to her guns. She would not buy me any clothes. And so my dad had to end up going out and buying me clothes. So that dynamic started there. My
Yeah.
dad's abuse was, and he was my favorite because he was the safest person for me because he was the nicest of the three. Like
Mm.
he was predictable. He was more predictable of the other two, but he didn't protect me. And there was actually a time I remember when my brother was going off on my mom. He was screaming at her. He was yelling at her. And my mom said, "Where's your dad?" And I'm looking around. I can't find him. He went and he hid in his bedroom. He
Mhm.
literally, so he was clearly being triggered, right? He was, the little boy in him got triggered, and I know he was abused. And he literally hit, because my brother was bigger than him. So, there was the fear. So he didn't protect me. Um, and it would seem like my teenage years between 12 and when I was 16, when my mom passed, I felt like she hated me. And I felt like I hated her. And I know that's common with teenagers,
Yeah.
but I always felt like she hated me. She would be loving and caring one minute and doting. And then the next minute, she would just completely be angry and call me a name. And so, I grew up in this unstable kind of environment.
Yeah.
Um, and so that, so it was just really interesting. And I just recently, like in the last few years, kind of put my whole timeline together and kind of understood that. And it was really interesting, to see that. And now I'm going through pictures and I'm putting pictures together of me growing up. And that's been really interesting because
Yeah.
I'm remembering stuff as I'm going through these pictures. That's really interesting.
Wow. And then your dad?
Yeah, my dad, and even my dad and I were always close. And so, and the hard thing with my dad too is when I lost my mom, right after I lost her, he basically told me, I can't afford to take care of you. You need to quit school and you need to go get a job.
Okay. No.
And,
Oh,
he was done. He was done being dad. He was done doing all this stuff. He didn't want to take care of me. And I mean, I'm just standing here. Last I knew, I was going to college. And now it's like, oh no, you're not going to college. As a matter of fact, you need to quit school. You need to go get a job and take care of yourself.
mm,
So even though there was those huge bumps, and I realized, and I even confronted my dad. I confronted my dad as an adult. I did. And I can remember I was sitting on the couch with him, and I was sitting on one end, he was sitting on the other, and he was facing this way, and I was facing him.
ah,
And I confronted him about the abuse. And I said, why didn't you ever stop it? He wouldn't even look at me. His chin started quivering and he was not going to talk about it. Not. So, as a matter of fact, when I was doing the workshop, when I went through it, he died when I was going through it. He was living with us and he passed away right in the middle of me doing that workshop, which was, yeah, it was a challenge. But yeah, so there was just, it was just a lot of neglect. And it was just, and I know, and researching stuff about my parents, I know that they had their own abuse. And I know that this is generational,
yeah.
you know. But my question that I'm still struggle with is why didn't you stop it?
That is a big question. Yeah, this is it. I mean, I just find like back in, whichever years it was, it's always like our parents now, when we're talking on the podcast, they just weren't equipped, were they? They just
Mm,
weren't equipped. They didn't have the resources, they didn't have the knowledge or, the power or, to
no,
actually make a change. So yeah, it's really different times. Really
it
different.
really wasn't. I mean, here in the States, I mean, there wasn't even really laws in place protecting children when I was little. Like,
No,
even if anybody called the police on my brother, I don't know what they would have done.
no. We'd be like, oh, it's a family thing, leave us out
Yeah,
of it. Yeah.
don't do that again. I mean, I mean,
Yeah,
there wasn't much there. There's much more now. They're not enforced as much as they should be. And in some cases, they're over enforced, but
true.
that system is broken for sure. But yeah, they're just, and there wasn't the self-awareness that our parents had.
No, there
They just
wasn't.
kind of repeated what they did, what their parents did.
Exactly. Yeah, it was, wasn't it? Yeah, you're right. Wow, so many more people are waking up now.
Yes.
Do
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah. Oh no, thank you so much for sharing that. And I'm sure that this is going to resonate with so many. As you were talking, I was thinking, wow, this really resonates with me as well. And it's interesting because we always associate abuse with like the kind of abuse with childhood abuse, sexual abuse, but neglect, abandonment, these are
Hmm.
all really important as well. And people might even think, oh, our childhood was just normal to, to them.
It's
This
normal
is
for
normal.
them.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had one woman who came to the workshop. She was a friend of mine. She was very sweet. And she was coming to the workshop and she was going to support a friend that was going through it. She goes, I don't really need it. I mean, my parents drank and they were alcoholics, but they were fun.
Yeah.
They were fun. But so I was fine. And I looked at her and I said, How could your parents, when they're drunk, give you everything you need and meet your needs? Take care of you and protect you. They're in a different state, they're in a different mental state. And then she realized it. She realized, oh, and I said, yeah, it's okay. Your parents were fun, and I know you love them. It doesn't mean that they're terrible people, but
True. Yeah.
there
Yeah.
was neglect.
That was yeah, and because I've spoken to some addicts, and some even say that that they felt like they were better parents when they were on cocaine or alcohol.
Oh yeah,
Oh, you just think, really?
yeah,
Wow. Yeah, it's just
yeah.
sad, very sad. Wow. So okay, so I just think it's fantastic the journey that you've been on, and so
It's been
when
a
did
ride. It's been a ride.
and so what inspired you to start your podcast, Healing and Growing Hand in Hand?
Oh, it's such a great question. And so much of it is, because I struggled for so many years and there wasn't the stuff out there that could help me like there is now. My whole goal is to get information out there to listeners so that, there's awareness and there's resources and there's help so that that person that is sitting there so afraid to make that first step might possibly do it. One of the statistics I found very interesting is that on average, women who are sexually abused as children is between the ages of 13 and 17. And on average, they don't say a word about that for 4 decades.
Wow.
I know that to be true from my experience with working with women, and it doesn't even have to be sexual abuse. So, my point in that is rather than having women or men even suffer for 20, 30, 40, 50 years before they finally reach out and get help, maybe if they listen to my podcast, something will resonate with them
Yeah.
that will cause them to go ahead and take that first step.
Yeah. Wow. It's just raising that awareness and letting people know that they're not alone on this journey.
Correct. Right. Exactly. We don't need to do this alone. I did it alone. It was me and God, and it wasn't easy.
Wow. So do you believe that by having a faith, it really can progress healing?
Absolutely, for me, absolutely. I've known me and God have had a relationship as far back as I can remember. And in going through the pictures of like, when did I meet him? Because as far back as I remember, he's been in my life. And I think I know, and I actually still am in contact with that person. I think I'm going to reach out to him and ask him. But I think it was when I was about 3 or 4, and they were babysitting me, and I went to church with them.
Wow. Okay. Interesting. Yeah. It is. Yeah. And yeah, I've heard that a lot from so many people that how just faith transformed their whole being, their whole
Yes.
life. I just, yeah. And it doesn't have to be like a religion, does it? It could just be like you said, God or your higher
It can be
self.
spiritual. It can be spiritual, yeah. I mean, it did help me, and I know in my life God is real, and definitely helped me. I don't know if I would actually be here without him,
Yeah.
honestly, because there were some really, really dark times.
There was, yeah, goodness, yeah. How did your community and people around you impact you when you were on your healing journey?
It's interesting. That's a great question because I'm trying to think. I did so much of it on my own. There were some standouts for me. There were some women that came alongside. There was one very special lady that really taught me about forgiveness and just really, she has a real interesting relationship with God too, and really kind of opened my eyes, but more importantly about forgiveness and how important it was for me. And it was for me, and it didn't just diminish what they did. But it just helped me not to become bitter and angry, carry that anger turns into bitterness and resentment. And just, I didn't want to live that life.
Oh,
So there were some people that kind of stood out, but I'll tell you honestly, I did so much of it alone because that is just the way I kind of did things as a kid. And I took that into my adult life. And honestly, there's a big part of that was shame. I can't tell people this stuff.
yeah, it's your family. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't tell people this stuff. And of course, it was all my fault, right? In my head, it was all my fault. So if I tell you,
Yeah.
you're going to look at me different.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, absolutely. And especially the emotional eating part, because I also
Oh,
suffer with that. And I just, yeah, it's awful, isn't it, when you're relying on that so much to comfort you and to fill like a huge void that you have within you.
yeah.
And even with that, again, I also put on a lot of weight, and I just felt like people were just blaming me for overeating. It was my
Yes.
fault. Yeah. So I carried that blame that, yeah, I got fat because I was greedy.
Yeah. It's so true. I mean, the thing that's so the people that haven't had the big trauma like what we've dealt with, it's so hard because, and I've talked about this before. It's like when you get triggered, when you're not managing your triggers, and you get triggered, and and in that trigger you overreact, right? Because it's always way over the top, not does not line up with what the situation is. Things are said, things are done, feelings are hurt, and then you got to go and clean that up.
Yeah.
And I got, frankly, I got sick of that. That was another reason why I wanted to heal, because I didn't want to hurt anybody anymore. But and I don't know why I was going in that direction. Sometimes I do that, but it's just interesting. Oh, that's what I was going to say. And you act out like that, and what happens is when you're triggered and you act out, and then that person across from you starts looking at you like, okay, whoa, what's going on? And you're watching this, and you're over the top, but
Yeah.
this thing has gone over the top. You don't have any control over it anymore. And then this person is backing up. And that just triggers you more. And so that just takes that shame and takes you deeper and deeper and deeper. And you can't help it. And that's the thing, that if the listeners are out there and you've had trauma and you're not dealing with it, I can completely relate to that. That is so common. And that is a showstopper. That is a thing that stops so many people from finally reaching out. That shame is so deep. And
So
I heard, and this is really interesting, that really what shame is just a set of beliefs you have about yourself.
mm,
And
true.
when you change those beliefs, there's not that shame.
Interesting. Yeah, yeah. So what would be the first steps that you'd advise my listeners if they are currently suffering from shame right now,
Well, if you are suffering from shame and you're suffering from trauma and you haven't had any trauma therapy, my first thing is always find a trauma therapist and start there. It's really important, because the difference between the trauma therapy and the talk therapy is, and those of us that have trauma, we need to not only just get it out of our body because it stores in our body, but it stores in our subconscious. And a trauma therapist is going to have the modalities that's going to help pull that out. Once you've started on your healing journey, there's other modalities that you can do, and you can do on your own even. But really, you do need help with getting that initial trauma out of your system.
So important, yeah, absolutely. And then I think belief work is also very important. That was very impactful for me,
Yes.
because yeah, we just hold so many negative beliefs about ourselves growing up, and again, a lot of it's conditioned into us, or what we learned from others, or what we were led to believe about ourselves. So there's a
Right.
lot of unlearning to do.
Yeah, yeah. I did a lot of deconstructing and reconstructing, seriously, over the last probably 10 years or so. A lot of deconstructing, and that's really important. But it's a challenge,
Yeah.
because you're that's exactly what you're doing, is you're undoing beliefs, and you're questioning beliefs, which there's nothing wrong with that. We just, as those of us who have gone through traumas, we don't normally do that. That's not a normal thing for us to question. We just go along with it because we don't want to stir up anything. So you start questioning some of your beliefs.
Yeah, yeah, true. Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. Amazing. And so, what do you think are some of the common misconceptions around healing from trauma?
Well, I think a lot of people think that they can't heal from it. Now, while we don't, we can heal from it. We don't completely 100% heal. I believe we're always on our healing journey until we take our last breath. But
Yeah.
what you can learn to do is manage it instead of letting it manage you.
Okay. Oh, wow. I love that. Thank you. Yeah. Amazing. Thank you. And
It's
so,
empowering.
yeah, can you share a bit more about your workshops that you have coming up?
I would love to. So the workshop I was mentioning earlier, I have turned around and recreated it, because that one was very religious and this one is not, and it's online, and it is a powerful workshop, 8-week workshop for women, strictly for women. And we keep the workshop very small. There's no more than 15 women. It is online. It's completely secure. So it's 8 weeks. It's going to be one night a week for 2 hours. And we don't go and relive stuff. That's not what we do, and just talk about our pain. It is not talk therapy at all. We actually do exercises to help you on to get you going either at the beginning of your healing journey or deeper. And then there's lessons and exercises. And then at the end of it, what's great is there's a community that you get to join that you will be there forever to have support and friends and just, like-minded people with you.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. And so, what's next for your podcast?
Well, we're on a break right now. So I just finished season one, 114 episodes, I believe it was. Yeah, it was a lot. So we're starting it in January 2025 again. And I'm adding one more pillar to it. So there, you mentioned it. So the first pillar is people telling their stories. The second one is bringing on experts. The third one is bringing awareness about the different areas of abuse. And the fourth one is prevention. So I'm going to be bringing on a lot more experts and stuff that are going to help with, parenting or, just all that, just the whole prevention area in how we can prevent and we can start protecting our children more.
Very important, isn't it? And yeah, I always say it starts from, us parents educating our children, teaching
Yes,
them what right and wrong is,
right.
and then I guess teachers as well play a big part in that as well.
Definitely, definitely. Yeah, they're a huge, they're the other eyes that are on these children and they
Exactly.
know stuff. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Oh, amazing. Thank you so much. So where can my listeners find you?
Well, gosh, let's see. My websites are Healing and Growing Hand in Hand Podcast.com and Women's Childhood Abuse Healing Workshop.com. You can find me on YouTube with I think it's under Lisa Tickle or my podcast. I'm on Spotify. I'm on Apple Podcast. I'm also on Instagram, Lisa M. Tickle. I'm on TikTok, Lisa Tickle, and LinkedIn. So I'm also
Oh,
on
wow.
LinkedIn. Yes.
Amazing. And will you be looking for guests if people want to come on your show?
Yes. Especially experts in the trauma area. Especially, yes. I'm definitely looking for experts. I do like to offer, survivors a place to have to share their stories because we all
Yeah.
connect with the stories. So I do invite some guests with stories. Mhm.
Perfect. Okay, fantastic. Yeah. And so any of my listeners who'd like to connect with Lisa, I'm sure she'd love to connect with you. I know you're very
Yes.
active on Instagram.
Yes, as are you.
Yeah. I think it's
Yes,
definitely
I'm
my
always
favorite.
liking your stuff.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's definitely my favorite platform right now. I don't know why. It's just easy to use.
Yeah, yeah, it is. Yeah.
Hmm. Excellent. So, and that's all we have time for today, my friends. And I hope you enjoyed the show. And we look forward to seeing you in the next show. Stay blessed, my friends.